What is up, everybody, and welcome back to another Courtside Podcast here on the Basketball Network. I'm Caleb, and I'm joined by my good friend and co-host, Connor. Connor, NBA season's just around the corner. How we feeling?
Dude, we're feeling so good. We have less than 2 days until the NBA tips off. Dude, I'm ready. I'm excited to talk about our predictions for this year. We've kind of sort of been doing that the past few weeks, but kind of wrapping up the predictions aspect, and we actually get to dive into the play starting next week. So.
Exactly. I'm so ready for it. College basketball is just around the corner as well, so a lot of hoops on the horizon. But as you said, wrapping up the predictions part, and I'm just ready to get it going.
For sure. So you mentioned college basketball, which sort of ties in as in I want to talk about something college related with you.
Okay.
I feel like we'd be doing a disservice as a sports podcast if we didn't mention how exciting college football has been the past 3 weeks. Like, can we just take a minute and just appreciate the beautifulness of college sports right now?
College football has been absolutely electric. I feel like there's at least one upset every week, if not multiple.
I mean, what is it? The number one team has lost like 3 straight weeks now.
Yeah, it's
Like,
been
crazy.
absolutely insane. And, who knows? I think Oregon's going up against a ranked opponent next week. Now they're the new number one. So we could see that happen again. And hey, I don't know if you saw the AP poll earlier today, but Vanderbilt coming out at number 25.
Vanderbilt is
huge.
ranked. Then Army and Navy are both ranked as well now. And then, lo and behold, dude, there's 2 big undefeated Big 12 teams in the top 12 now. Which is crazy to think about.
That one's a little bittersweet with our Oklahoma State Cowboys losing a heartbreaker in Provo, Utah against BYU on Friday night. But as you mentioned, it's been so fun to watch, and I love the shape up. And I don't think we could have asked for a better year of college football leading into the first year of the 12-team college football playoff. Genuinely, I have no idea what it's going to look like just because of all the tosses and turns we've seen, and the rankings and the wins and losses are piling up for a lot of these teams. But I feel like if you go to most of the big conferences in the nation for college football and look at who's at the top, you wouldn't expect to see who you're seeing right now.
Not at all, dude. I mean, the SEC right now, you got LSU and Texas A&M, which, people were not predicting them. And then the Big 12, Iowa State and BYU, and then we've seen Utah fall off the past 2-3 weeks. Like, it's insane.
Exactly. And then even going over to the Big 10, you don't see your normal Ohio State or Michigan at the top. It's, Oregon and then also Penn State who's looking good. It's just everywhere is complete chaos and madness, and it's a lot of fun to watch. At least since Oklahoma State's not doing that good, at least the rest of the nation's fun to watch, and a lot of things are shaping up.
No, it's kind of reminded me of college basketball, how I'm like, dude, I just feel like we can get an upset like every week now.
Exactly.
It's just like it's been so unpredictable this year. And anyways, I just felt like we just had to mention that, just as general sports fans, you can't, just ignore what's been happening in that world.
100%. And like you mentioned, I mean, football has been great, and I'm just hoping that's just a precursor for what the upcoming basketball season is going to be. But jumping into today's show and what we're going to be talking about, as Connor mentioned earlier, we're just going to be doing our last set of predictions going into this upcoming NBA season. So going through all of the major awards, who do we think is going to win? Things like most valuable player, most improved player, defensive player of the year, rookie of the year, all of those sorts. And then we're going to make our final predictions on who's going to make it to the conference finals and who's going to win the NBA title. But jumping in like we do every single show, we're going to jump into our transition 3. And first up, we have some interesting news. Monty Williams, former NBA head coach, is now been hired to coach boys basketball at TMI Episcopal Prep in San Antonio. So quick reminder, Monty Williams used to coach at the Phoenix Suns and then was at the Detroit Pistons, but was fired after one season after signing a 6-year, $78 million contract. Now he's heading back down the ranks to coach high school basketball. But I think we all know it's because his son Elijah actually plays at TMI Episcopal Prep, and is actually the 22nd ranked prospect in the 2026 class.
Yeah, dude, exciting news for him. I still don't, and I don't think anyone really understands what the heck the Pistons were doing. If they knew they were gonna, let him go after 1 year, why did they sign him to that giant contract? But I mean, I'm sure his aging process is going to be a lot slower coaching this team than coaching the Pistons. But also there's a couple other notable players on that team. We got Tim Duncan's son and Bruce Bowen's son on this team as well. So definitely some interesting players outside of Elijah Williams as well. I'm just happy, for him that I'm sure it's a job that he's also passionate about. Obviously, he gets to probably spend a lot more time with his son, than he did coaching in the NBA.
Exactly. And quick note, so Monty Williams is actually going to replace NBA defensive guru Bruce Bowen, who was the former head coach. This was reported by Chris Haynes. And I saw a tweet earlier that I thought was pretty funny, but it was just basically mentioned that he's still getting paid that contract from the Detroit Pistons while he's getting to coach his son. So talk about living the life, getting to coach your son and the sport that you love, but also getting paid millions of dollars to do it, since you were fired before your contract was up. So, although he's not in the NBA no more coaching, I think it's going to be a fun opportunity for him, and thought we definitely had to mention it. But moving on to our second piece of news, we have NBA star guard Anthony Edwards mentioning that he's interested in pursuing an NFL career. Connor, I know you were the one that kind of brought this one up, so I'll let you go ahead and take it from here. But what are your initial thoughts on this piece of news and what Anthony Edwards was talking about?
Yeah, just to have, everything he said if he wins a championship in the next 3 to 4 years, he wants to switch to football. Which, I mean, he said this starting back, I believe, when he was still at Georgia. I think he said, he's always a better football player, and he enjoyed football, or he said he enjoyed playing football a lot more than he did basketball. But obviously, when you were the projected number 1 pick in basketball, that is where you decide that you want to go. I just thought this was just interesting. And, Anthony Edwards has never been one to lack of confidence and to making bold statements. But I think it's interesting. I'm curious what happens if he wins a championship 5 years from now. Does he still kind of consider that? But I'm also interested to see if they do win a championship, is he actually going to switch? Obviously, he says he enjoys playing that more. He switched to basketball because he watched his brothers play basketball. But I will say, comparing NBA salaries to NFL salaries, especially a player of his caliber, I feel like that's kind of hard to walk away from.
Exactly. And it's good to know Edwards actually did not play high school football. He had switched over to basketball by then. So thinking someone that, is pretty confident in themselves, didn't even play high school football, but, has the ability to play in the NFL would be absolutely insane.
I believe one statement he said is, I was the best 9 and 10-year-old player in the nation.
Yeah, exactly. And he also mentioned he thinks he's going to be the first one. So we've seen players like Michael Jordan, playing the NBA and then also the MLB. Deion Sanders playing in the NFL and the MLB. But we haven't seen that NBA, NFL crossover just yet. I feel like we've seen a lot of guys who played college basketball go on to the NFL, but no one that actually has played like big NBA minutes move over to the NFL. So if I'm being completely honest, I don't think this is gonna happen. Even if he wins the championship, as you mentioned, that money is just a bit too much to walk away from. But it is kind of funny, and something that's pretty interesting to think about.
Yeah.
All right, well, moving on to our last piece of the transition 3, we have a lot of news and injuries that have came out in the NBA so far. And to be honest, leading up to the season and this close to the season, there has been more news than in any of the recent years I can think of, with a lot of players getting waived and different things like that. But we'll go over quickly some of the important ones to note. So Precious Achua of the Knicks actually suffered a strained left hamstring in the preseason and will be reevaluated in 2 to 4 weeks. So the Knicks are going to be without one of their big rotation pieces from the front court perspective. And then Max Strus of the Cavs is set to miss at least 6 weeks due to a right ankle sprain, which I feel like that one's actually pretty big for the Cavs. So initial thoughts, Connor, two big pieces of injury news. I hope it doesn't affect these teams too much, and hopefully it doesn't seem like it's going to be super long, but we are going to see at least some period of time where they're without these guys.
Yeah. I think Precious is kind of a bigger injury just because we've talked about how thin the Knicks are in the front court. Losing Isaiah Hartenstein and then trading away now Julius Randle. They don't have a whole lot of options there. I mean, they definitely have some players, but I think that's a big blow for the Knicks. And then Max Strus, I think the Cavs are a little better off. I think they have a few more wings, that can help fill in there. But I will say 6 weeks is a brutal time frame. And I think, as we see with ankle sprains pretty often, that 6 week, that time frame that the doctors give is a pretty general. It can be 4 weeks, or he could extend it all the way to 2 months. I think people just deal with ankle sprains at different paces.
Exactly. And yeah, Precious Achua, I think now he was kind of that second string front court, as you mentioned. So yeah, they are pretty thin there for the Knicks. But I think Max Strus was actually going to start for the Cleveland Cavaliers. So they're going to be down one starter for the first month and a half of the season. Obviously, they have a lot of wings, like you mentioned, Isaac Okoro, Karis LeVert, Sam Merrill, Georges Niang, a lot of guys that could kind of fill in there and play that role. But that's just going to hurt from a chemistry perspective going forward when he comes back, right? They've missed a month and a half. And although it's not, over half of the season, it is an extended period of time where they're going to be without him. So hoping that, he has a speedy recovery and is on the shorter end of that, but they mentioned it's at least 6 weeks. So it could be even longer than that.
Yeah, definitely it's definitely a big blow, anytime you lose a starter. But I think the Knicks definitely have that ability to at least stay afloat, without their starter.
Very true. And then the last piece of news, just quickly want to mention, because feels like a fan favorite, the Orlando Magic are converting guard Mac McClung to a two-way NBA deal, which sources told ESPN. So if you don't know who Mac McClung is, he's the back-to-back slam dunk contest champion, and he now lands on an NBA roster finally after starring in the G League for the past couple of seasons. Exciting news for Mac McClung. Not sure how much he's going to play. We mentioned this a little bit before the show, but at least it's cool to see that he's getting that recognition and is going to be on an NBA roster at the start of the season.
Yeah, hopefully if he competes in the slam dunk contest again, he'll actually be an NBA player and not a G League player this time around. But yeah, I'm a little interested as to why they signed him, just because I feel like they have a decent amount of guards on their team, and because of his size and stuff, Mac McClung isn't someone who can shift down to a 3 or whatnot. He's also, when he has played in the NBA, he hasn't done the best. But definitely an interesting signing. I'm interested to see how often they'll keep him on with them on the team as compared to playing with the G League.
Yeah, going to be interesting for sure. But hey, Mac McClung has saved the slam dunk competition, to be honest. It was really down for a couple of years, and the past 2 seasons have been very fun to watch and brought me back to that battle between Zach LaVine and Aaron Gordon, just seeing some of the really fun and crazy dunks that they were putting on. So I'm excited for Mac, and hey, I'm hoping he's just gearing up and ready for the All-Star weekend in 2025. All right, well, let's move on to the piece of the show that we're both the most excited for. And this is going to be where we're going through, talking through all the different awards, making our predictions on who's going to win each of them. And I think the one we got to start off with is the big one of them all, most valuable player. Last year, this is won by Nikola Jokic, and feels like he's in the running every single year. But we have a couple of different players that I think we'll go through and chat about on why we think they're some of the contenders for this award. So, Connor, I'll pass it over to you. Who do you want to talk to on, and who are you thinking might have a chance at winning this one this year?
Yeah. I mean, I think we should start with Jokic, just because he is that reigning MVP and his chances of becoming a 4-time MVP, which, is a pretty rare achievement. Not a whole lot of players have achieved this. I think, LeBron's the only current active player to even achieve this. It just shows you how hard it is. Which I think Jokic probably has a pretty good chance. We were talking about the Nuggets the other day. They're not a very deep team right now. They're going to be relying on their starters and their star players a lot. Primarily Jokic, the offense has already run through him. So I think he has a pretty good chance to actually repeat.
I agree. I mean, the one thing we know about Jokic is he is going to play and play hard, and he's going to be there. I mean, he has consistently played at least, it looks like 70 games basically every season he's in the league. So the one thing we know we can count on with him so far is durability. The other thing is he puts up stats. I mean, he is on triple-double watch night in and night out, whether it's, scoring the ball when they need him to, putting other players in the position to succeed, or obviously getting rebounds as well, just being a 7-footer. He is just a generational talent and so fun to watch. And so I feel like he's going to be in the top 3 vote getters, barring any injury. But as I mentioned earlier, just someone that I feel like continues just to play and be an Iron Man for the Denver Nuggets. I really don't know if Jokic can take a step forward in any place. I mean, the dude averages basically 26, 9, and 10 or something like that. Just absolutely crazy numbers that he's putting up. So definitely someone that is going to be on the watch and obviously has earned the respect, winning 3 different MVPs so far, and someone that I think is going to be in consideration come the end of the year.
Yeah, and I know Jokic is probably going to face what LeBron, has pretty much faced ever since he won his 4th, and that's voter fatigue. We hear it so often, but it's so true. We just get so used to this guy putting up such good numbers that it's like, oh, even though, he hasn't gotten worse, he's still as great as he was. It's just like, it's not as wowing just because he did it the previous 3 years. But I will say, I think Jokic has a big advantage over a lot of MVP contenders in that it's not just his stats he puts up. You take him off of his team is a borderline playoff team, if that, where I think a lot of the MVP candidates this year, their teams are still going to compete without them, which is not a knock on that individual player, but I just think that speaks volume to the kind of player that Jokic is, and that, without him, the Nuggets aren't going to do anything.
That's a great point, because I think a lot of people, when they think MVP, they just think, some people think best player on best team. Other people actually take the word valuable, and it's like, if this guy is not on this team, what is this guy? What does this team look like? And Jokic has been one of those dudes where it's like a combination of both some of these seasons, right? Like the Denver Nuggets have been the best team in the league. We've seen that with, winning the finals a couple of years ago. And so he was definitely the best player on there. And then, as you mentioned, the Denver Nuggets without Jokic play in at best, in my opinion. So I definitely think he has a chance to be there at the end of the year. But that brings me to another guy I want to talk about, who I feel like has just been battling Jokic every single year, and that has been Joel Embiid. So he's a one-time MVP, won it a few years ago. He's another guy we just have to throw up there. In the past, I want to say 3 or 4 seasons, 1A and 1B has seemed to be Nikola Jokic and Joel Embiid, as long as Joel Embiid has been healthy. Last year, only played 39 games. so wasn't in that conversation. But the 2 previous years was right there next to Nikola Jokic, and obviously winning one of those. The one thing I want to bring up about Joel Embiid this year is with the addition of Paul George and the emergence of Tyrese Maxey. I don't know if that's going to be a part of him not getting those numbers or kind of not getting to that status that we've been seeing. Because in years prior, he didn't have those guys that were just right there next to him as, great players. He was always kind of the focal point, and I still think he will be. But now he has guys that can take the load off him. Where Nikola Jokic, yeah, he has Jamal Murray, but Nikola Jokic makes Jamal Murray great. I don't necessarily know if Joel Embiid makes Paul George this year or Tyrese Maxey great. I think they're obviously great players on their own.
Yeah. I don't see Tyrese Maxey becoming, a star in his own right as a danger to Embiid, but I will say I think adding that third star does kind of knock down Embiid just a little bit. But that being said, Paul George, once again, his health. Paul George, if he's not on the floor a whole lot this year, I don't think that is going to be a big deterrence to Embiid. But I think Embiid's health is the deterrence to him as well, though. We saw the NBA instituted they have to play 65 regular season games now to even qualify for these awards. It actually came out recently, an NBA legend kind of slammed Embiid for sitting out back-to-back games, and it's like Embiid's probably prioritizing his health so that he can compete in the postseason. So my thing I'm kind of wondering is we've seen Embiid worry about the MVP so much, and he did win it. So I'm kind of curious now if he's kind of like, oh, I don't really care about that. I want to win now. So I wonder if, he'll prioritize his health and being able to actually play in the postseason rather than trying to win this MVP.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think now that he kind of has one, he's already won that MVP. He might now just be at a point where he's like, hey, obviously if I'm there, I'm there. But at the end of the day, he wants to win a championship. And that's kind of where I feel like he's at.
Yeah, no, for sure. And to me, that reminds me of Giannis Antetokounmpo, who, me and you have also kind of talked about him could be a potential MVP. But I think he's a player, he's won MVPs. Obviously, he has won a championship before. I think he cares about the championship more. I feel like he really doesn't care about winning MVP. Obviously, he's had his fair share of health problems of recently, but in my eyes, I feel like he also has, a new star player in Damian Lillard that he didn't have when he won the MVPs all those years ago. So to me, Antetokounmpo and Embiid, at least in my eyes, I feel like they're going to kind of be like, oh, let's prioritize the postseason rather than my individual success.
Yeah. Giannis Antetokounmpo, 2-time MVP already, so a little bit in the same boat as Embiid there. And I think you hit a good point with bringing in Damian Lillard, another guy that's, ball dominant to be as, successful as he is when he's on the floor. I just feel like he's another guy that you just have to mention because at the end of the year, he's definitely going to be there barring injuries. I mean, he puts up insane stats and has probably been one of the freakiest athletes we have seen in the NBA in recent time. I mean, a dude that's 7 foot but can move like him, handle the ball, get to the rim at will. Also, does a lot of things on the defensive end with blocks and rebounds. And then again, he's kind of like Nikola Jokic in the sense of triple-double watch every single night. I mean, this guy points, rebounds, defends, scores, gets assists, all the things. He's another guy that we have to mention. The one thing that Giannis is lacking is the jump shot. It feels like it goes in ebbs and flows with him. But I agree. I don't necessarily know if he's going to win it this year because he's definitely looking at, hey, he's won a championship before, but he wants to get back there and definitely do it with Dame this year.
Yeah. And I think you said something important. It's like it's almost impossible not to mention him. Just because he is one of the best players in the league. he's kind of like LeBron was in the 2010s. I think the last time he won MVP was 2012, 2013. I can't remember what exactly year it was. But pretty much all the way up until 2020, LeBron was probably top 5 in MVP, before the season starts, which obviously I think, LeBron really didn't care in those years. I think he was focused on trying to beat Golden State. But I think Giannis is similar in the respect that you have to put him in there until he shows that decline of, he's not at that level anymore. You just can't not mention him.
Yeah. And speaking of another guy we have to mention, Luka Doncic. This guy, he puts up the numbers. I mean, he is absolutely insane. And I feel like I mentioned this with every single one, but this one might be the most prolific triple-double watch every night. I mean, he is going to do whatever it takes to will that Mavericks team. We saw that back when they had no one on their team, and now that this team is stacked, he still is one of the guys that always has the ball in his hand. I mean, his usage is through the roof and one of the highest in the NBA. And last season, averaged almost 34 points per game, along with putting up around 8.5 or 9 rebounds, and around 10 assists a game. So was basically almost averaging a triple double. The biggest question with Luka Doncic, I feel like, is year after year he's there, he puts up the stats, but is this the year that the voters are finally going to give it to him? Because he's always there numbers wise. It's just a matter of, are they going to give it to him? And I feel like that last run last season that got him to the finals might actually help coming into this season if they're looking like they might do the same thing.
Yeah, I think it depends how many games and where the Mavericks end up seeding wise. It's very rarely I feel like we see someone not a top 4 seed win the MVP. I think Russell Westbrook was probably the last one to do that. But that season, he broke the triple-double record for most in a season. It was kind of hard not to give it to him. But yeah, I think the key for Doncic is going to be getting those wins and getting the Mavs into at least a top 4 playoff spot, if not a top 3. Especially we keep talking about how stacked the West is. If they're in the bottom half of the playoff bracket, I think we'll probably see something similar. He'll finish top 3, but he's not going to win it.
Yeah, I think the Mavs are there, though. And just kind of, if you've listened to any of our previous podcasts, I mean, the moves that they made this offseason, I feel like has got them over the hump where they're going to be a top 4, probably top 3 seed, in my opinion. And I want to bring it back to what we said about Nikola Jokic for Luka Doncic. He's another one of those guys where it's like, if you take Luka Doncic on that team, they're like a play-in team, in my opinion. I mean, even though they brought in Kyrie Irving, who's another guy that can kind of take on that role, what Luka Doncic does for this Mavericks team is absolutely insane. And the games where he's not on the floor, you can really see how much they're missing him. And I feel like looking at this list, a lot of guys are like this, but he's one of the ones I'd put at the very top that his value to this basketball team is huge in terms of their success for the year.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think, without Luka, Mavs are, like you said, probably a play-in team. But with Luka, a lot of people have them as contenders. And I think it would be a disappointment if they don't get a top 4 seed.
Agreed. And another team that, ended up finishing number 1 in the West last year, which was kind of a surprise, but an exciting team nonetheless. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander of the Oklahoma City Thunder has to be put on this list. He has put himself on the map and the Thunder on the map, honestly, these past couple of years. I mean, averaging over 30 points per game. And, this is another case of best player on best team that we're looking at, right? Especially last season. And the Thunder look primed for another run at it and getting another 1 seed. So he definitely has to be someone that was on the list. I think last year, if I'm not mistaken, did he finish, was it 2nd or 3rd in MVP votes?
I believe Shai was the runner-up. I don't know, someone can fact check us on that, but I believe he was the runner-up. ended up giving it to Jokic. But yeah, no, I think definitely best player, on the best team helped Shea. But I don't want that to take away from his value to the Thunder. Um, but that being said, I do think people view, um, Shea not as an expendable player, but he's someone that the Thunder, I think if they lost Shea, the Thunder will probably be all right.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously you got Jalen Williams, you got Chet. They have players, almost like a Band-Aid that they can put in until Shea gets back. And, the Thunder will probably still be favorites in a lot of their matchups, even without Shea. Now, to say that, I think on this list, I think Shea is an extremely good two-way player. His defense is under the radar. Like, he consistently is one of the leader in steals. He's not a player that the Thunder have to switch off on defense, which I think is huge value for Shea. But yeah, I definitely think being on one of the best teams helps Shea. Because obviously he's been putting up good numbers on the Thunder ever since he's been traded, but the Thunder have just not been good. And so, they haven't had that much attention. Obviously last year, being vaulted into that 1 seed brought a lot of attention, and I think people were actually realizing, oh, this kid is actually really good. But yeah, so I think the big thing for Shea is definitely being a top 2 seed, probably.
Agreed. And I like what you said about Shea, where, the Thunder have the pieces to where if he were to be out, they'd be okay. Not 1 or 2 seed okay in any right, but probably still a playoff team if he's out for an extended period of time. And that's the thing that's going to hurt Shea, in my opinion, is the Thunder are just such a good team. Like when you say a lot of these other teams, like when you say Dallas Mavericks, you immediately think Luka Doncic. When you say Denver Nuggets, you immediately think Nikola Jokic and all the other ones that we've gone through. When you say the Oklahoma City Thunder, you think Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, but then you also think like the team of the Oklahoma City Thunder, in my opinion. And when we're talking about MVP and most valuable player, that's going to be one thing when these voters are going through and making their decisions that are probably going to hurt and go against Shea is just how good that team is. Whether that's right or wrong, and argument of if he's the most valuable player is another conversation. But something to keep in mind when we are making these predictions is that's just someone that has such a good team around him that could come back to bite him in terms of MVP voting.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, there's a lot of players on the Thunder who contribute, because Shea could take every single shot for the Thunder, but he doesn't need to. And he knows that for the team's success, there's other players on this team that need to have a shot. So
exactly. And I think the last one I want to mention before we jump off MVP and make our exact prediction is someone we talked about a little earlier in the show, someone that has all the confidence in the world. And I think he truly believes he's going to be the MVP of the league this year, and that's Anthony Edwards of the Minnesota Timberwolves. I feel like we've seen it a lot with the NBA as marketing Anthony Edwards as kind of like the new face of the league, putting the Timberwolves on opening night, really showcasing the talent that he has and putting them in a lot of, marquee matchups and games. So I can see the NBA wanting it, but then obviously we can't, go without saying how incredible he has been last season, 26 points per game, but really was the guy that got it going for the Minnesota Timberwolves and helped them make it to the Western Conference Finals. The one thing and the one knock I'm going to say about Anthony Edwards compared to everyone else on this list is Anthony Edwards has kind of disappeared in parts of games for the Minnesota Timberwolves, where I feel like with everyone else, they are not disappearing whatsoever. And good to know Anthony Edwards has only been in the league for 4 years, so he still has plenty of time to win this award. I'm just not sure if this next season is the season where he takes that step. He's going to be a great player, going to be an all-star, could even go for all-NBA first team. I just don't know if he's going to be that guy that's going to make it to the top of the MVP standings.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think he'll probably be in at least the discussion, I mean, losing a score by Karl Anthony Towns, that slack's going to have to be picked up somewhere. You're not going to expect that from Gobert. You're not expecting that from Mike Conley. You'll obviously get some scoring back with Julius Randle, but he's not the scorer I would say that Cat is. Um, you know, Anthony Edwards probably has a lot of slack to pick up on the offensive end. As much as I feel like they leaned on him at times last year, that's probably even going to be more so this season. Especially now they've gotten to the conference finals. They've been there before. Obviously, did not go too well for them. At times, it looked like they belong. At other times, it did not look like they belong. As you said, Anthony Edwards disappeared throughout that series more than once. But yeah, I think that just, it's something that I think a lot of young players, they get to that stage, but they just don't have the experience for it. So I think it was a great learning chance for him. But I think he's primed to have a really good season. I don't see any reason why he should not be in this MVP conversation. But I think, kind of like you said, I just think there's other players probably on this list that are just a step ahead of him, in terms of, basketball maturity, in terms of, probably team wins and whatnot. I mean, I know I said that, but the Timberwolves were the second best seed last year in the West. But yeah, I just don't think. I think I'm in agreement with you. He's not quite there. I think maybe even next season he could be, but just not quite at that threshold.
I agree. So Connor, we've kind of went through our list of contenders, you would say, for the most valuable player. Who do you have winning the award in the 2024-2025 NBA season?
Dude, this pains me to say, dude, but I think it's going to be Luka. The expectation, Mavs are going to be a top 4 seed. I'm expecting them to be probably a top 4 seed. And that's going to be in big parts because of Luka. As we've seen every year, if he's on this team, Luka is the reason the Mavs are as good as they are. Even with Kyrie, I know they're getting Klay Thompson, which I think benefits Luka in the sense he has now a catch and shoot guy on his team who he knows can, for the most part, will consistently hit his threes. Klay, it seems like anytime Klay has a bad game, where he shoots like 1 for 7, people just highlight that game, but overall, Klay Thompson, is a really good shooter and historically is one of the best shooters in the league. Anyways, I just think the team that is built around Luka is perfect for him and allows him to thrive. Because, you can't, I don't think you can just double team Luka anymore with this Mavs team, and I think that it's going to open up a lot for him. So I'm expecting Luka. My finishing in the top 3 is probably similar to last year. I think I got Jokic and Shea as well.
I was going to say the same exact top 3. It was going to go Luka, Jokic, Shea. For all the same reasons that you hit, Luka is primed for the MVP, and I think it's finally going to be the year that comes to him. I like what you said early on in the show about Jokic. I think this is the year that we're going to see voter fatigue at its highest for Jokic, and he's going to put up numbers that are going to be enough for the MVP. But I don't think he's going to get the votes, and so I think it's going to go to Luka. Not to say that Luka's not going to put up the same numbers or numbers that are worth the MVP as well. But one thing I want to bring up in terms of everybody that we've talked about so far, have you noticed just how many international players are in the discussion for MVP? Luka Doncic, Nikola Jokic, Giannis, Joel Embiid's technically international, and so is Shea. So 5 of the 6 guys that we just went through are all international players. This is just a huge shift that we are seeing in the NBA. And I mean, there have never been more stars in the league, I want to say, and it's been really fun to watch.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I think that just tips the hat in how the NBA has just worked so hard on expanding basketball to becoming an international sport. And just promoting the league as an international league. If this was 5 years ago, I think Giannis might be the only international player inside the top 3.
I agree. Yeah, so it's been really fun to watch, but we'll move on to our next award. So we got the Rookie of the Year. Last year's winner was Victor Wembanyama, but if you know anything about this award, you can't win it twice. You only got one shot at it. So going through a few of the guys that we have as contenders, I feel like this is the first year in a while where I look at the 1 and 2 picks of Zachary Risarche and Alex Sarr, and I just don't think either one of them are going to win it. So good to note that, they were considerations, but I don't necessarily know how much we're going to talk about them. But the first guy I want to talk about is Zach Edey. I said it on an earlier podcast and I'll say it again. I think Zach Edey has a really good shot at winning the Rookie of the Year this year. When we think about the Rookie of the Year, we got to think about guys that are, one, going to make an impact on their team, and two, are going to get the minutes, because that's the biggest thing with rookies is they usually don't get that many minutes. And with some of these guys on the list, I just don't know how many minutes they're going to get. When I look at Zach Edey, I actually think he's going to get a decent amount of minutes, which allows for a decent amount of production. And honestly, I'm just pretty high on him. So Zach Edey with the Memphis Grizzlies, I think is a really good shot to be a contender for Rookie of the Year this year. And I think you might differ on this take than me, so I'll let you take it from here.
Yeah, going back to the top 2 picks, I think the reason why, because people weren't big on this draft class, and I think the biggest reason is you had your top 2 picks were purely potential, not production, and I just don't think teams really knew a whole lot about your top 2 picks, so I think that's why they're not really expected to do a whole lot. And players with potential just generally don't win the Rookie of the Year because they're usually not quite ready for it. Mm. But to your Zach Edey prediction, I think he'll for sure be up there, because I think you hit it on the head. He's probably out of the rookie class will probably play the most, especially right off the bat. He was a 4-year player. He's an older player compared to some of these other guys, which, as we know, and we talked about last episode, those older guys are typically more NBA ready and can contribute more right off the bat. Which, I don't want to dive once again into our last episode about his fit on his team and whatnot. But the biggest thing is he should be getting those minutes. The Grizzlies don't really have anyone else at his position. But yeah, so I would say that about Edey. He definitely has the chance to, which I'm going to shift us a little to a different team in the West, a lot worse. So let's talk about Donovan Clingan. Currently in a logjam at center. I think he's a player who he put up, he wasn't scoring 20 and 10 like Zach Edey was, but his efficiency and his defensive prowess, there's a reason he was, there's a reason he was a lottery pick. And a lot of people viewed him as a steal in the draft because he fell so far. But I will say, I think in order for him to even get considered for this, the Trailblazers are going to have to trade away at least one of their centers. Because right now Robert Williams and DeAndre Ayton are going to eat away a lot of his minutes.
Donovan Clingan was not super high for me originally for Rookie of the Year until I saw some of him in the preseason. I'm pretty sure he just had a game where he had 14 points and 20 rebounds. And if that's any indication of just a sliver of what we're going to get in the regular season from Donovan Clingan, that makes me very excited for him and gives really high upside on picking him for a Rookie of the Year. The way he was playing in that offense, setting screens, running hard to the rim, and then he was just attacking that ball from a rebounding perspective as well, was really fun to watch. I think he probably has maybe a higher upside than Zach Edey in terms of, actual potential. The thing for Donovan Clingan versus Zach Edey is, can Clingan take the steps now to get where Zach Edey is in order to get that production? And then obviously what you mentioned, what is the center position going to look like in the Portland Trailblazers? Because they do have a lot sitting there right now, and could prevent him from getting the same exact minutes that a player like Zach Edey is going to get on the Grizzlies.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it might also depend on the guard play from the Trailblazers. Do they have someone who can even get him his ball and whatnot? Get him in the place that he needs to enable to score. Does he have someone who can throw him lobs and have some dump off passes? Because as we've seen, sometimes those rookie centers, if they don't have a guard who can do that, they don't put up big numbers. But I will say, speaking of guards, I think there's probably two in this draft class that have the chance to win Rookie of the Year. I think it kind of depends. I think one is going to depend if he can carve a rollout for himself, and one will depend how much he will get to play, just because he has, a historically good point guard there, and that's going to be Reed Sheppard and Stephon Castle. So I kind of want to get your thoughts on them first.
Yeah, let's jump into Stephon Castle first. So Stephon Castle, I think he was the 4th pick for the San Antonio Spurs in this year's draft. So he's going to be playing alongside of Victor Wembanyama and Chris Paul, who they brought in during free agency. But one piece of news that we did break earlier on in another podcast was that Devin Vassell, which is the starting guard for the San Antonio Spurs, is going to be out for an extended period of time to start the year, which I think that creates some opportunity for Stephon Castle. And whether he takes it or not, that's on him. Stephon Castle has looked great in the summer league. He looked great in the preseason in the minutes that he got to play. And I think he's going to be able to develop well alongside of both Victor Wembanyama and Chris Paul. The caveat to that is when you have a guy like Chris Paul on your team who demands the ball in his hands so much, and then obviously Victor Wembanyama with everything that he can do, can Stephon Castle be effective enough in the limited touches he's going to get for the San Antonio Spurs to make it to the Rookie of the Year? I truly don't know. In my opinion, just kind of comparing that to Klingon and Edey, I don't think so. But he does have the opportunity, and I think this Devin Vassell injury is actually going to be really big for him in one, getting the initial start in the lineup, but also getting a lot of run and getting comfortable in the system early on in the year, which could help him later on as he continues to grow and get more minutes.
One thing about Stephon Castle, dude, is, which I'm not saying he's going to be this kind of player, but when Shea was in OKC, when his first year, they also had Chris Paul. That year Chris Paul left is the year that Shea, became the player for OKC, and they found their, cornerstone guy. So I think a big question is, can Chris Paul have a similar impact on Castle as he did with Shea? Can he kind of show him how to be, an initiator and whatnot? But yeah, and then so I think that'll be key for Castle, is how well he can learn under Chris Paul. But then going to Reed Sheppard, he's kind of for me, I think he's a dark horse for Rookie of the Year. I think because he can be the Rockets' 6th man. We've talked about the Rockets being log jammed pretty much at every position at the current moment. But, I think he showcased his shooting ability, in college, in the summer league, and in preseason so far. I know people kind of pick on him for his size, but he's actually an above average defender. He gets steals. He can stay in front of people, and I think, as we know with the Rockets, I think it's important when you're young to run the floor. He likes to run the floor, but he can also pass as well. I'm not sure if you've watched them at all. He can distribute the ball, in the pick and roll, in the open floor. I like Reed Sheppard. I think it just depends, if Udoka is willing to trust him or not to be that 6th man off the bench.
I agree. And honestly, when I initially thought about the Houston Rockets, I didn't think he would get much playing time just because of the youth that they have and so many pieces. I feel like the Rockets are actually pretty deep in the sense of all the different pieces that they have. But if you look at their roster from a backcourt perspective, he has a good shot at getting a good amount of minutes. I mean, I think he's going to be part of that second rotation. So whether or not he gets enough minutes on the second rotation to actually have an impact in terms of, stats and showcasing his ability and all that to compete for the Rookie of the Year, that's to be seen. But I like what you mentioned on Reed Shepherd. I also think that he is a lot more NBA ready than people thought. If you saw him in the preseason or in the summer league, I mean, he was making NBA type of shots early and often. I think the shot that we see a lot of rookies, especially guards, struggle with is dribble pull-ups, especially when you're dribbling to the right or to the left and fading. And he was hitting those consistently. Didn't really matter where it was, from the mid-range or even further back. So that's one thing that's pretty beneficial to him. And then obviously he's probably the best shooter in the draft, or one of the best shooters in the draft. And when you can shoot, the NBA is always going to find a place for you. And so that's going to get him run as well. And I like your take on the defensive side of things. Coming in, a lot of people thought he was going to be too small, but we have seen small guards flourish, and he's really not that small. I mean, he's 6'2", so Steph Curry is only listed at 6'3". And you see a lot of other guys. I mean, they have a guy in Fred VanVleet that's shorter than him on the roster, and obviously we know what he's capable of. So I like Reed Shepherd, and I agree. I think he's more of a dark horse pick for the Rookie of the Year, but definitely someone that we have to mention.
Yeah,
and then one more person I want to quickly mention is Dalton Connect, because this guy might have just had one of the best preseason games for a rookie that I have ever seen. So if you don't know, Dalton Connect is on the Los Angeles Lakers, and he was actually a projected lottery pick, but slid all the way back to the 17th pick and fell to the Los Angeles Lakers. And he played in a summer league game against the Phoenix Suns, and Dalton Connect scored the Lakers 20 straight points in the final minute of regulation to force overtime, which the Lakers went on to win in. So he ended up scoring 35 points in the game, shooting 10 for 18 from the field, hitting 8 threes along with 7 rebounds, and then had 2 steals and 2 blocks. And this guy was on fire, and it was so fun to watch. And I've mentioned this in previous podcasts, but his game is so NBA ready. I think he is someone that can come in and make an impact for the Lakers early, and that's going to at least put him in the conversation of Rookie of the Year. Another thing that we see with the Lakers is they're really not that deep. So a guy like Dalton Connect that can, make minutes look good and different things like that, like, he's going to get a lot of run, and that's just something you have to consider when predicting this award.
Yeah. I don't hate Dalton Connect. My biggest thing, though, is like the Lakers, at least in their starting 5, they have a lot of contributors, and especially players that historically have played a lot, heavy minutes, which obviously new coach. Obviously, if you're bringing in a scorer like Connect, you at least want to give him a shot. I'm definitely expecting him to come off a bench. I don't think he'll break the starting 5. From Connect's standpoint, I think, will he have more impact than just scoring? But yeah, so I think those are 2 key things: how much he gets to play, and if he can do something else besides score.
Yeah, I agree on that one. I think he's just a fun story to watch, and someone that's going to be really exciting when he is on the floor. Because that preseason game, that was just absolutely electric. But we've kind of went through all of the rookies that we have as our contenders for Rookie of the Year. So Connor, who do you have winning the Rookie of the Year in this upcoming season?
All right, I'm going to give it to Donovan Clingan, because I know the Portland Trailblazers are going to clear out that front court. Especially when you spend a first-round draft pick, inside the top 15, you have to give him minutes, especially for a team that is supposed to, be probably tanking. Not probably, is going to be tanking. You have to give your young guys minutes. So, and I think we hit on his, he's actually scoring and rebounding well. So, yeah.
All right, I got Zach Edey. I just think this guy is going to have so much production, and just the amount of time he's going to be on the floor is going to allow him to produce at a high level. To me, I just see him early on, and especially in this first year, just having a higher upside in terms of production and scoring, rebounding, and all different sorts. Especially just with the Memphis Grizzlies not being super solid at that front court slot. They have a few guys, but honestly, I could see Zach Edey starting at some point this season. And so with that, I just have to give it to him. I think he's going to pull it out and win Rookie of the Year. Which would be pretty cool to see a guy that, has won National Player of the Year in college could end up winning Rookie of the Year in the NBA as well. All right, moving on to our next award, we have the Defensive Player of the Year. Last year, that was Rudy Gobert that ended up winning that. And honestly, this one feels like it's probably down to a two-man race, and it's the same race that we saw last year, and that's between Rudy Gobert and Victor Wembanyama. So the biggest question is this the year that Victor Wembanyama can, pass Rudy Gobert and actually win the Defensive Player of the Year? Connor, what are we thinking? Are you thinking it's going back to Gobert, Wemby, or someone else?
I'm jumping on the Wembanyama train. The amount of blocks that dude had as a rookie was insane. I'm sure that number will probably only go up. But I think he has that ability because, I feel like Rudy Gobert is really only known, as being that defensive anchor down low. You put stretch bigs in, you can kind of mitigate his impact. It's not Rudy. Victor Wembanyama is someone who, even if you have a stretch big, he can still impact like a lot on the defensive end. I'm not sure how much they factor wins into the Defensive Player of the Year, which, it's definitely less than some of these other awards, but Wembanyama is my personal favorite.
I gotta agree. This guy coming off his rookie campaign, he averaged over 3.5 blocks per game. That is absolutely insane. For context, Rudy Gobert only averaged roughly 2. So a block and a half more a game, if you extrapolate that out over an entire season, is over 100 blocks. Absolutely insane numbers. And when you think Defensive Player of the Year, you don't only think blocks, obviously. You also think of, defensive efficiency and what that looks like. And I really like what you hit with Victor Wembanyama. This guy can basically guard 1 through 5. He's so fast for how big he is and just an incredible defender. And obviously, a generational talent on the defensive side. Don't even have to talk about the offensive side because that's crazy as well. But such a great defender at such a young age. And I have to agree with you. I think this is the year that he overtakes Rudy Gobert as the Defensive Player of the Year. For context, Rudy Gobert is a 4-time Defensive Player of the Year winner. So it would be a pretty tall feat and tall a thing for Victor Wembanyama to beat Rudy Gobert. But I think this is going to be the season where Wemby's going to end up taking it. And I do want to mention one other guy in terms of Defensive Player of the Year. Although it does seem like a 2-person race, you got to think of a guy like Bam Adebayo, someone that's just super solid on the defensive end. And he's another guy that can kind of go 1 through 5 in terms of a player that can guard all different positions. I like to kind of equate him to a younger Draymond Green when we think of defensive mindset player. And a guy like Bam Adebayo, and we know just how effective Draymond Green has been, but obviously probably a little too old in terms of him winning this award. But another guy that I just want to mention, and then last question I have for you, Connor, is when we think of Defensive Player of the Year, you usually think of big men. Do you know of any guards who have a shot at winning this or at least being in the conversation?
So there's only one perimeter player who made first team all defense last year, and that was Herb Jones, which the second team was rounded out of pure guards, essentially. Second team was Alex Caruso, Drew Holiday, Jaden McDaniels, Jalen Suggs, and Derek White. Out of those two, I got Alex Caruso and Drew Holiday maybe as the only two who could potentially. But yeah, I think it's a little hard especially now that you have a player like Wembanyama in the picture. But I feel like those three guys are probably like Herb Jones and Drew Holiday. I think especially are above Alex Caruso just a little bit. Um, but I think Marcus Smart was the last player to win it. And it took a really exceptional defensive season for him to do it. But I don't see these guys having that. So yeah.
I agree. Yeah, Alex Caruso is going to be the one that I mentioned, especially because, now he's on the Oklahoma City Thunder and basically they brought him in to defend. So another guy that, might be in the conversation, but as we mentioned early on, I think it's a two-person race with Rudy Gobert and Victor Wembanyama. And it seems like we both have Victor Wembanyama coming out on top and winning the Defensive Player of the Year this year. Next award we got is the Sixth Man of the Year. Last year was won by the Minnesota Timberwolves' Naz Reid, and I feel like he's coming back for it again this year. So we have him listed as one of our contenders. But we also have a lot of other guys listed through. So I'll quickly go through who we have as some of our contenders, and we can chat through them. So we got Buddy Hield from the Golden State Warriors. Brought him in this year, and he's been electric in the preseason, lighting it up from three. And so a guy that I think is just going to take a ton of shots and make a ton of shots, especially in the offense that the Warriors have. Dante DiVincenzo also on the Timberwolves, so we could see that kind of hurt both Naz Reid and DiVincenzo with both of them going at each other, but that's if DiVincenzo doesn't start. I could see later on in the season or even early on maybe replacing Mike Conley with DiVincenzo, so we'll see if he's even eligible for this one. Josh Hart with the New York Knicks. It looks like he might be moving out of the starting rotation and into that six-man role. And if that's the case, you better watch out for him because he is such an exceptional player and a great glue guy to have. And then the last couple of ones that we have are Bobby Portis with the Milwaukee Bucks, who he's just someone that's consistently in this conversation. And then Grayson Allen with the Phoenix Suns. Connor, I think you put this one on here, but I like this take. Obviously, moving out of that starting rotation with Tyus Jones coming in. And so someone that can come in and be a spark plug for the Phoenix Suns. Connor, who are you feeling strongly about on this list, and who do you like to take home the Sixth Man of the Year this year?
Yeah, I'm feeling the strongest about the defending Sixth Man of the Year, Naz Reid. And also, I'm actually on the Buddy Hield train as well. The only thing about Buddy Hield, I just feel like the media and just everyone else just does not like Buddy Hield. But I think you have to respect what he does. He's a player who can score 30 points for you. He can hit 10 threes in a game, if he needs to. And obviously going to the Golden State Warriors, I think that's a great place for him. I will say, I think if they can hide his defensive efficiency or deficiencies, which the Warriors are known to do with players. I think it'll be a great situation for him, especially one he can thrive. But then going back to Naz Reid, you just cleared out Cat, which obviously Gobert and Cat were the big players who ate into Naz Reid's minutes. Well, now you don't have that second center, affecting his minutes. So I think he should get more minutes off the bench now. Because they're going to need him to play those minutes now. So those are my two favorites right now.
I agree. I like the Buddy Hield take. Obviously, being a Warriors fan, that makes me excited to hear. The one thing that's going to hurt Buddy Hield, I think, is the fact that there are so many other shooters around on Golden State. And if you know Steve Kerr, sometimes his rotations don't stick. So we could see a game where Buddy Hield's playing, mid-20s in minutes, and then the next game he comes out and only plays 10. So that's the one thing that scares me. I also like the Grayson Allen thought on it, to be honest. I really think he was so big for the Phoenix Suns last year, and to get that production now coming off the bench, I think he would have been in the conversation last year if he was in that role. So I could see him being big. But I think I got to go with you on the Naz Reid take. I like exactly what you said. Moving off of Karl-Anthony Towns. So even though you brought in Julius Randle, there are going to be some minutes that you need him to play and probably fulfill even more than he has done last year. And when he won it last year, he did it with what he had. So now having more, that could be a big thing. The other thing that we got to talk about, though, with Naz Reid, and the one thing to consider is that voter fatigue. Are they wanting to pick it 2 times in a row? We see it with other awards, so I'm not as concerned, but just something to know.
I feel like with the 6-man, voter fatigue isn't as bad. We see repeats a lot. With Lou Williams, people are like, oh, they need to name the award after him, because I think he won it 3 or 4 times.
I think so.
So I will say it's not as bad. I'm sure it's definitely still there. But yeah, I'm right there with you.
All right. Well, moving on to our final few awards, we got the most improved player last year went to Tyrese Maxey. If you're not exactly sure what this award is, it's basically for exactly what it says. A player that, might be solid right now, but has just such a jump and improvement. And that's what we obviously see with everybody that wins this award. So for me personally, I got a lot of contenders from the Golden State Warriors. And the only reason why I have that is because these guys, or at least one of these guys, is going to have to take that next step for Golden State to get to where they are. And I think they're primed to do that. So we got Moses Moody, Jonathan Kuminga, and Brandon Podziemski. For me, out of these 3, the biggest one I think is Jonathan Kuminga. I mean, last year averaged around 16 points per game. Klay Thompson's no longer there, and the only guys that they brought in the offseason were role players. He is been given the opportunity to step up and honestly be that second scoring option behind Steph Curry. Now he's just got to go and take it. And I think we've seen steps each season, but this has got to be the year where he grows enough if the Golden State Warriors want to be a team that, people actually have to consider when we're thinking about an NBA title. But also another thing to know about Kuminga, it's a contract year. I mean, he's a restricted free agent, but he's wanting one of those max contract extensions. And if he's going to get that, he needs to produce because we haven't seen it yet to that extent. And so I think that's going to be another factor to consider, and something Kuminga's going to have in his back of his mind night in and night out when he's trying to produce at a high level.
Yeah. No, I think I'm with you. I think there's a good chance it comes from one of these 3 of Warriors, just because there is such a big vacuum and uncertainty on that team outside of Curry and Draymond right now. But I don't disagree with everything you said about Kuminga. But I will say the other, Moses Moody, is also in the same exact position. He's up for an extension, and I think he also wants that max contract. But personally, I think he's in such a better position for it, just because he only played 17 and a half minutes per game last year, averaged 8 points a game. But you took out his biggest competition for playing time with Klay Thompson. Kuminga, he's still got a lot of playing time. I think, like you said, he averaged 16 points a game. But I just think Moses Moody just has a better opportunity just because someone from his rotation has now left. So that's why I like Moses Moody, just because of the playing time. Yeah.
I agree. I think just being a Warriors fan and seeing Kuminga, it's like the fan in me just wants so bad for Kuminga to be the guy that we have been thinking he's going to be since we drafted him. And we drafted him on his upside, and we see those steps each and every year. But instead of taking that one small step, I need that one giant leap. So I'm hoping that Kuminga or Moody, at this point, I don't even care who it is. Give me Podziemski too. Like any one of them, I just need you to be who we think you're going to be. Some other considerations are Evan Mobley to think about. And then also for Cade Cunningham. And the reason I bring Cade Cunningham up is we know Cade Cunningham is a great player. But the one thing about Cade Cunningham now is, can he take that next step and go from being a great player to an all-star? And I feel like Cade Cunningham can do that this year. He's in a spot where he's going to get all the usage and, production that he wants being in Detroit. It's just whether or not he's going to take it. And I think this could be the year that we see him take that next step and become an all-star.
So I think these two players, Evan Mobley and Cade Cunningham, could win. I think they are going to have to play so well and at such a high level for the entire season. Um, because we saw Tyrese Maxey win this last year. And he was not a bad player the previous year. I think he averaged like 17 points a game, but I think he got up to over 25 last year. A big part of that was obviously James Harden leaving, so he was the sole point guard on that team. But I think you need a jump sort of like that where you're going up 6 to 8 points, while also maintaining some level of efficiency. Not just chunking
Mhm.
up more shots. Personally, I like Cade Cunningham more so, just because I think he has the potential to impact the game in more areas than Evan Mobley does. Obviously, Cade can rebound, he can pass. We know he can score. He's about a 20-point per game scorer. But being that big guard he is, uh, he can pretty much you can plug and play him at any of the guard spots. And even if you want to go pretty small ball, you can put him at 4 in very rare occasions. I would say, he doesn't have the best body type for it. But I also think in terms of who else is on that team, I think Cade Cunningham has a much better chance. Evan Mobley is fighting Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell currently, who are both ball dominant guards who are also scoring guards, mind you, which not saying, they can't play together. I just think Evan Mobley, it's a little bit harder just because he has people who are older than him, who are a little more established in terms of their star power than he is, who are going to want the ball more.
I agree. I think they're both good considerations. Cade Cunningham is definitely who I would lean towards between the two as well. But in the end, if I'm having to make a prediction for most improved player, I think I'm taking Jonathan Kuminga. And that's probably more just from a bias thought process and also just what I really want to happen. But he is prime for the opportunity, and so are all these other Golden State guys. So give me Jonathan Kuminga to win the most improved player. Connor, who do you got?
Yeah. I think, like I said, I'm right there with you with the Warriors, but I think it might come from Moses Moody. Just 8 points a game. I could see him easily doubling that, when he gets his opportunities. Honestly, I think a big part of it might be, does Steve Kerr actually give Kuminga extra looks? I think we've seen in the past Steve Kerr likes his guards for obvious reasons, and he's kind of shied away from big men. So I think it's just going to be who is going to get the extra touches.
Very true, very true. And you never know with Steve Kerr, to be honest. I mean, he is someone that will change starting lineups, change rotations just like that. But moving on to our last award, we got the Coach of the Year. Last year, this was won by Oklahoma City Thunder's Mark Daigneault. But some of the contenders we got for him are Houston Rockets, Ime Udoka, Taylor Jenkins from the Memphis Grizzlies, Steve Kerr from the Golden State Warriors, Greg Popovich from the San Antonio Spurs, and first-year head coach JJ Redick of the Los Angeles Lakers. Connor, I'll send it over to you. Who are you liking this year, and who do you think is going to take home the Coach of the Year?
I think there's an interesting group of coaches here. Personally, and I know a lot of people are talking about him, Taylor Jenkins. Obviously, I will say I think he does have an advantage because the Grizzlies had such a bad year last year. So I think if he gets his team to one of the top 6 seeds, I think there's a good chance he does win this. But I also don't hate Udoka on the Rockets. Once again, it could be biased just because I'm a Rockets fan. But there's a lot of talk with the Rockets, and I think Udoka is a big reason the Rockets are probably going to take. I'm not saying they're going to take a big step, but they're expected to take a step, and I think a lot of that is with Udoka. I think another year with the players, especially with the same team, these players are going to be more comfortable in his system. They've had more time to work out the kinks and whatnot from last year. Hopefully the defense, with some of these individual players are going to improve, and the shooting which Udoka, has been known to do, is to improve the shooting on his players, especially those shooting guards. So for me, those are the top 2 players. But I think the other 3 could be some dark horse candidates.
I agree, and I kind of think that's how I have them as well. So I like exactly what you said with Udoka. If the Houston Rockets make that jump forward that we're kind of expecting, I really like it for him. And then you hit it right on the head with Taylor Jenkins. The Grizzlies had such a bad season last year that if they're just in the playoffs, he's going to be up there. And then if they're in that, top 5, top 4, it's almost a guarantee, it seems like. Unless the voters really think back on, hey, this team was injured, Ja Morant was suspended, like there's a lot of reasons why they weren't that good last year. But for the other guys, so quickly, Steve Kerr, he's a dark horse candidate in the sense of everyone thinks they're just like play-in bound and that's like the only thing that they can do. But if this team can get it going and they can get a top 6 seed and maybe win a series or 2, I mean, watch out. They have guys like Steph Curry on the team. Like anything could happen. JJ Redick being a first-year coach, and when you have that paired with LeBron James and Anthony Davis, you never know what can happen. I mean, he could have a great season with the Lakers and obviously end up winning it. And then with Greg Popovich, I just feel like if the Spurs somehow make the playoffs, he's in the conversation just because they basically got Wembanyama and Chris Paul, and then everyone else is just kind of like role players here or there, or up and comers. So if he were to do something like bring the San Antonio Spurs to the playoffs, he's definitely in consideration. But you know what? If I had to make a guess and predict who I think is going to win the Coach of the Year this year, I got to give it to Taylor Jenkins. And it's not really the flashiest pick or the boldest pick, but when your team has such a historically bad season last year compared to what you were doing the previous couple of years, and with what I'm expecting them to do, which is to be in the playoffs this year for sure, you got to pick him. And so I got Taylor Jenkins winning the Coach of the Year. What about you?
Yeah, I'm going to quickly give my take on JJ Redick real quick. I think obviously, internally, the Lakers always have high expectations for anyone who's a part of that team on the business side or on the player side. But I think externally, there's very low expectations for the Lakers as a team. So I think if they do anything other than what people are expecting, like if they outperform, I'm expecting him to be in that conversation just because I think the media and the rest of the league just have low expectations for the Lakers as a whole. But my predictions, I'm going to be biased here. I'm going to say Ime Udoka. I'm fully expecting the Rockets to take that leap. I think by the end of the season, I'm expecting them to be playing pretty well, especially once they nail down those rotations. I think they have a huge pool of players that they can find, that key rotation for. And I'm expecting Udoka to do that. I think he's proven, he's a good coach in this league. And so that's why I'm taking him.
I like it. I definitely think Udoka is a really good pick and a solid one that definitely could win it. Well, I think that's all of our predictions for every award in the NBA this season. Let us know what you think on each and every one of them. Do you agree? Do you think there's anyone else that we consider or anything else like that? But before we sign off, Connor, you have anything else you want to throw in there?
Dude, it is the week of the NBA opening day. Catch that on Tuesday. I think at 6:30, if I'm not mistaken, is when the first game tips off. I'm so excited. I know Caleb's excited. We've both been basketball fans, since pretty much we could walk. So it's always one of my favorite times of the year. Hope y'all enjoyed this episode, though.
Exactly. Just like Connor said, NBA starts on Tuesday, and we got a doubleheader matchup, and then obviously it just gets better after that. Well, we appreciate everyone for listening and watching the Courtside Podcast here on the Basketball Network. If you're on YouTube, make sure to hit that like button and also subscribe. We'd really appreciate it. If you're listening on any of the podcast platforms, make sure to give us a 5-star review if you like the podcast. And as always, leave us comments. We'd love to hear it. But thank you so much for listening and watching, and we'll see you next time on Courtside. Peace.
Peace.